How is it rocking, Dween Nation? Stay here because we are just about to get underway. In the meantime, please like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. We put out weekly sports content, and we want to continue to build up Dween Nation and the brand that is Dween Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy. Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Janoah Agudelo, and we're back for another episode. More NBA content right before we jump back into some football, but very important NBA content. But before we jump into some draft talk, Janoah, how you doing, my brother?
Yo, Dween Nation, I'm doing great, man. Hey, we're talking about hoops for this week, possibly next week, and Justin, it's all football, baby. All football, all day, every day, especially fantasy seasons along the way. Dween Nation, you got to check out our future fantasy content. That's going to be fire. As far as this episode's going to be, Justin, because, hey, we're talking about the future stars of NBA here. You know what I'm saying? We had a good draft last year, groundbreaking with Wemby. But how is it going to transition to this year's draft, Justin? I'm excited to hear your thoughts. And, hey, by the way, can you help me pronounce the guy that the Hawks drafted at number 1 here? I honestly, I'm not going to lie, Justin, I only know a tad bit, not as much as we knew about Wemby last year.
Yeah, last year's draft was definitely had more headlines, had more top-tier players. This year, unfortunately, has been deemed one of the worst draft classes. That is, I mean, obviously we will see it once these players hit the court. But to help you out, the Hawks, they drafted a guy named Zaccharrie Risacher. If I'm even pronouncing that right, I believe I am. But yeah, wow. An interesting draft that where a lot of people, to be honest with you, probably don't even know who the number 1 pick is, which I believe is like one of the first times in recent memory. You got Wemby and Zion, and Lonzo was a 2nd overall pick. Apollo Banchero. Like, there's been a lot of names, and I feel like people were kind of wrapped around it more compared to this year, where it's like there's just a lot of names that are just possibilities. And so, but still, there's a lot of interesting names and interesting landing spots that we're going to dive into right now. We're going to start at the top because the number 1 pick deserves some talk about him, and it's Zaccharrie Risacher. The Atlanta Hawks go for him. They get lucky as hell, and they get the number 1 pick somehow, and they get this guy, this small forward out of France. So a lot of people don't know him, and he's not playing any college hoops. He's not playing in March Madness. Same with the second, or was it the second? Yeah, the 2nd pick as well. And so, but the pick is a solid pick. I wouldn't have gone him number 1. I would have gone Alex Sarr. And it's interesting because, I mean, well, the Hawks get rid of DeJounte Murray, so maybe they're looking for someone who can kind of fill in that spot. But Zaccharrie is a taller player, but he's raw. He's a raw talent. So I look at him as a number 1 overall pick, and it is unfortunately pretty weak comparatively to the last handful of years. For the Hawks, I probably would have gone Alex Sarr. I really would have. I like him. He would have been my number 1 pick. And so I'm kind of meh. I'm gonna give it I would give it like a B, which is unfortunate. You don't want that for your first overall pick. So Zaccharrie Risacher, kind of meh. I know you said Zaccharrie is not kind of, you don't know too much about him, which I don't think a lot of people really do. But if you had any thoughts on the Hawks pick, let me hear it.
Yeah, Justin's actually solid here. You know, he is 6'10". And I do think he's going to be a great ball handler. Looking at his stats here, looking at his highlights here, he was a Euro Cup rising star. He has won a championship in the LNB elite team overseas down in France. So, this obviously isn't the most attractive pick, but for a number 1 overall pick, you got to believe that he's going to be able to, have that talent. There's a reason why these professional NBA scouts, gave their best, reports to the, Hawks front management. And they went out and picked them. And so, hey, last year a Frenchman win, this year a Frenchman win. I do believe it says here that he was born in Spain but grew up in France. So, hey, I'm still going to consider him a Frenchman. These Frenchmen now, Justin, we had this, kind of dominance of the Euros with Giannis and Jokic and Luka. And now, Justin, it's the Frenchmen. So now the NBA is being multicultural, multi-talented, which is what we love to see as basketball fans. And so I do think he's going to be solid for the Hawks. Now, is it going to be right off the bat? No, but that's how it is 80% in the NBA. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer for players to develop. Guys like Giannis, they weren't that ultra spectacular from the jump. It took them a couple years to develop. Do I think he's going to have a Wemby rookie year? Absolutely not. I think Wemby was just so talented coming out of France. And so I do think this is going to be a solid pick. I do think he's going to become a star player for the Hawks. But I think it's just to give it some more time. Just give it some time. A year or two, maybe 3 years before he really develops into something.
Yeah, and I think that's a good take to have on and a good outlook for them. What I'm most worried about is kind of the Hawks themselves. Like, where are they? What is their kind of not goal? Of course, everybody's goal is to win a championship, but kind of like I feel like they're kind of in a gray area where they're not. They got players where they can't compete for a title, but they're not bad enough to where they're scrapping at the bits and waiting for next NBA draft. So I think they're in a weird spot. Hopefully, Risacher can give them some sort of new edge where they can find their player. But yeah. So Risacher, a solid pick. And then the second pick, another guy from France. We got Alex Sarr. I mean, this guy is huge. He's almost 7 foot. Center. He could play power forward, especially with Washington signing Jonas Valanciunas. But I really like the talent that he is. He's got the build of a really great athlete. Reminds me of kind of Jaren Jackson-like. And so I think it's a solid pick. I had him over Risacher in my kind of rankings and research on it. But what do you think of just his placement with the Washington Wizards?
Yeah, so I like Sarr a lot. So, looking at Sarr, I actually thought he was going to be, the first overall pick. But looking at what the Hawks kind of needed and what, the Wizards needed, we do need the center. Excuse me. Centers are kind of taking over the NBA in some type of way, Justin. And so I feel like the Hawks, they do have Clint Capella, and we're familiar with Clint Capella, Justin, you and I. And so I do believe that I think they should have just made that franchise move just to take Sarr. You know what I'm saying? Like, France, and last year, first overall pick was a center. Why not make it back-to-back years a French center? I do think he would have fit well with the Wizards. But I do think this is going to be this kind of thing now where in the NFL, where it was a Bryce Young first pick and then CJ kind of second. And I feel like the second pick kind of outshines him year 2. I like Sarr better. I did know about Sarr going into this past NBA season, but this, Justin, was like the first time in the past 11 years where I did not know who the first pick overall was. There was only 2 players I didn't know when they were first pick. It was Anthony Bennett and Markelle Fultz. Those were the only 2 players that went number 1 overall in the past 11 years, Justin, who we just did not know who they were. It was like, who? Because I remember when Anthony Bennett got drafted, it was 2 years, it was a year after LeBron, or the summer after LeBron won his second championship with Miami. We're like, okay, Cavs got the first pick. They already have Kyrie. Who they're going to get? And it was like, who? And especially with Philly, they drafted Fultz. And I think that's the same draft class as, Jason Tatum. So, going into now with these 2 first picks, I think Sarr is possibly the better out of the 2, but they're so young, both 19. It's going to take a while for them to develop. But I do like Sarr, though, for the Wizards. With already, on that roster, they have Kuzma, who's, is established, great player. I like Jordan Poole to have a bounce-back year. And so, another thing is interesting, Justin. Didn't we mention in last episode that Valanciunas went to Washington, right?
Correct.
So I think now they're going to have a Twin Towers kind of thing going on there because you got to play Valanciunas. He is a stud at the center position. You also have Sarr, so I'm thinking they put Sarr at the 4, kind of like what the Spurs did with Tim Duncan and David Robinson. So, hey, maybe a Twin Towers thing kind of going on in Washington. Who knows?
Yeah, well, and the thing is, then that would make Kuzma a really big 3 player because he usually plays in the 4.
Yeah.
They're building kind of a tall, studded team.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny you mentioned Markelle Fultz because if you remember in that draft, the Sixers traded up to 1 with Boston at 3. So instead of waiting at 3 getting Tatum, they trade up for Fultz in one of the biggest fumbles in
Uh,
history, you could argue. And so,
Embiid and
yeah,
Tatum, man, what could have been?
what could have been, really, that would have been crazy. But yeah, so moving to 3, we're going to talk about our Rockets. We finally get to talk about some of our our team here. They get Reed Sheppard out of Kentucky. I got to watch this guy firsthand, and man, can he shoot the rock! I mean, 52% from 3 last year with the Wildcats. The team obviously underperformed, but I think it's to the fact that they were just a bunch of young freshmen and sophomores where it didn't click against a team like UConn that had a ton of players, and just they didn't have that experience to really make any type of run. And that's why, honestly, that the Aggies were able to beat them every time they played them this year, because the Aggies have veterans, Boots Radford, Wade Taylor, and Anderson Garcia, and more. And so a young team like Kentucky, even with them being coached by Calipari, it just wasn't enough. But looking back at Reed Sheppard, you look at him, you probably don't see where the talent is coming from. No offense. I mean, he's kind of smaller. And so a third overall pick is a high capital. I thought possibly the Rockets were going to dip into Donavan Clingan, and so I'm interested to see what your take is between maybe those two picks.
So I'm glad we didn't go with Donavan Clingan, Justin, because I am such a believer in Alfred Sengun. I feel like there was a lot of reports saying that if the Rockets were to take Donovan, they're gonna hear offers for Sengun. And Justin, as a Houstonian, as a Rockets fan, I love Alfred Sengun. I believe he's the future face of our team to go alongside with Jalen Green and Amen Thompson. And I mean, everyone knows how much I love Jabari Smith, and he is going to be a star for my beloved Rockets. So I think Reed Sheppard fits that, 2 or 3 guy kind of at the shooting guard position. But we also have a guy like Cam Whitmore and Tyrece. And so now, Justin, I feel like my beloved Rockets are now just missing veteranship. And I do think Ime Udoka is going to get the best out of Reed Sheppard. Reed Sheppard off the bat already reminds me of Austin Reeves. I mean, he is the most Austin Reeves, 2.0 player I probably have ever seen. I mean, if there was a movie about, LeBron James's, career and they get to the Lakers portion, this is the guy that's going to play Austin Reeves. So I love Reed Sheppard. I think he's going to develop into that nitty gritty kind of guy that, somewhere along his career, he's going to be a pretty good defensive guy, like a shooter. Like, whoa, who's this white guy playing defense? Like, hold on now. You know what I'm saying? So definitely like Reed Sheppard there. My Rockets are sad. Justin, this is a PSA to my Rockets. Do not trade anybody. Do not trade Jabari. Do not trade Sengun. Everybody that you have drafted post-Harden era, keep them. You tanked for a reason. We had those down years for a reason with John Wall and Jay Sean Tate, who I think we brought back. But it's just, there, hey, let's keep this young core together. Let's do what the Celtics did. Yes, we added some pieces around, but hey, Tatum and Brown, the media was calling to trade them, get rid of them. The ball isn't enough for both of them, and they end up winning a championship, Justin. You just got to keep that core together. Same with the Spurs. Yes, they won the title in 99, but then they drafted Tony Parker and Manu, and at first it was like, but then they win a title, and then they became a dynasty. So I think, Justin, you got to look at it this way as well. One last thing. The Lakers, they had, Kuzma with LeBron. They had, like, Caruso and Edey, and I bet you now, Justin, they wish they had those young players that are now, becoming stars. I do think they even miss Julius Randle. So my point is, Justin, with the Rockets, they have such a young core. Let's keep them together. We have a defensive-minded head coach. We have a good amount of picks next year. We have a good amount of cap space. We can use, Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks as trade bait, once maybe next year's, trade deadline. So let's keep this together. And I do think Reed Sheppard can become a good 3, small forward for the Rockets.
Yeah, and that shooting is something the Rockets kind of sorely missed behind Jalen Green. There really wasn't someone you could really count on behind the arc, and so he's the best in this draft at doing so, and so they scoop him up at 3. And now jump into we'll look at some more picks here. I think a really interesting one to bring up is Donavan Clingan from the Portland Trailblazers. The question that I'm just really curious and slightly confused at the pick. I like Clingan, but hey, you look at this team. They got Ayton. They got Clingan. They got Robert Williams. I mean, 3 centers that are all capable of starting games. And so I know he's 20 years old, and they might give him some time off the bench, but Portland's got an interesting, I guess you could argue a good problem, having 3 really good big men. But the rest of their team they need to fill out. I know they traded for Denny Avdia, so interesting what Portland did there at 6. Do you like Clingan as a prospect, or what do you think about Clingan?
No, yeah, I like Clingan. He's a solid guy, 7'2" there. But here's the thing, Jesse. You make the best point I probably ever heard. First of all, we love Robert Williams. He was such a stud on the Celtics. You know, that anchor, that defensive guy. And then you have Ayton. Some would question, his drive to win basketball game, not like playoff series or even the championship. We're talking about a regular season game in the middle of December, a typical Tuesday night in, February, where you're playing, the Wizards. Some would question if DeAndre Ayton can bring that drive to win games. The way he fell out in Phoenix, was just unbelievably just disappointing. I think he was part of the reason why, Monty Williams got fired and the downfall of the Suns. We're not sure if they're going to be back, in a top 6 seed ever again. You know what I'm saying? We love Booker. We love Kevin Durant. But hey, looking at this team right here in Portland, I like Scoot Henderson. I like Anthony Simmons, who's been there for quite some time. Shaden Sharp has shown some promise. Maybe that's probably why I felt like Portland should have went with the wing guy, but with best available, you got to go with Donavan Clingan there. With as many trades that went on night one of draft night in the NBA, I was kind of thinking that maybe they were going to dangle his name around, but he was, the best available at that spot. But I do think they should have got some trade and got a wing guy there. They do have their backcourt kind of set there for the next handful of years there. But to give them the benefit of the doubt, Ayton probably won't be there for much longer. I do see him being trade bait for a championship team. Maybe Philly, if Embiid is having some issues being healthy, maybe the Sixers can get Clingan, and maybe a handful of other teams. Maybe hey, if Brook Lopez leaves Milwaukee, hey, what if maybe Milwaukee might need a new starting center, and Ayton could be the guy. So that's something to keep in mind with Portland. So I do think that they're kind of eyeing Ayton like a make it or break it year.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to bring up. Bob Williams and Ayton they're seasoned veterans, and Ayton could be dangled in front of a lot of teams, and he's a huge player, and he's had good years and good games, so he could be on the trade market, and that would leave Clingan right there to be their future franchise center. But you were talking about trades on draft night, day one, and one the biggest, most baffling trades I've ever seen, and I would argue is one of the biggest steals, the Minnesota Timberwolves trade for Rob Dillingham with the Spurs. I was about to walk away with that Spurs being like, they got Stephon Castle, they got Rob Dillingham, they have Wembanyama. What a start. They trade away Dillingham, though, to the Timberwolves for a 2031 first-round pick and a 2030 swap. I don't get it. They're trading for somebody who's like 12 or 13 years old right now. That's what the 2031 pick is getting you at the moment. And so I'm really kind of baffled by that pick. But just past what the Spurs did, I really think Minnesota is the winner of this NBA draft. They get Dillingham at 8 for pennies on the dollar, I'd argue, and Terrence Shannon at the end of the first round from Illinois. What a way to go for Minnesota. They're able to get their future guard. Conley's 34, 35 years old. He might even be older than that. And so they get their future guard. And I also saw this guy first in first person. I was like, hey, this guy is a very good player. He was clutch with Kentucky in the games I saw with them. Like when he played against A&M, we won that game in overtime, but they were down. Kentucky was down. Rob Dillingham goes and makes 3 straight three-pointers, was a major pain in the you-know-what, but a very good player, and he's only 19 years old. So another really young guy that's going to come in here and be a really good piece for Minnesota. So I really think they're winners of the NBA draft, and they didn't even they just came out of nowhere. It was kind of a layup kind of decision, I think, for Minnesota to do what they did, and they did it. But what do you think?
Here's the thing. Okay, First off with Stephon Castle, I actually love Stephon Castle. And I don't know where you think about this, but I think he fits the best in San Antonio. That's just my opinion. I do think the trade between you mentioned the trade with Minnesota, it was a 3-way, I believe, right? Or was it a 2-way?
It was just Minnesota and San Antonio.
Okay, Minnesota and San Antonio. Here's the thing. I think that all these players kind of ended up in the right area. I think any of these two guys with Castle or even like, Dillingham and all of them, I think one of them would have fit well in Minnesota because I do think Minnesota is lacking one more scorer, one more ball handler. There was times in that series against Denver which they won in 7, but there was times where Anthony Edwards had to find somebody else, and it sort of just felt like they were kind of just, flipping the coin, and it wasn't really organized, and they kind of got lucky to beat the Nuggets. So I do think now, Justin, in Minnesota, they kind of get their next guy. I would say at the point guard position now. You did mention Conley's getting up there in age, but here's the thing with what's going on. So we just break it down. I do love Stephon Castle in San Antonio, but when we look at Rob Dillingham, I do think he's possibly just a tad bit better than Castle. I do like Castle. He feels very San Antonio Spurs like to me. But I do think, yes, Justin, I kind of agree with you. I think if Dillingham, right, he was originally drafted by the Spurs. Right. I think he would have been a tad bit better, Justin. But I think all this kind of happened for a reason. And, hey, I do think that Castle, though, is going to fit well in San Antonio. But like I mentioned, I do think Dillingham probably would have been just a tad bit better fit.
I get you. All right, sure. And transitioning to somebody who I think was a really good fit, Zach Edey. You could argue went a little too early, but I really like the fit with the Memphis Grizzlies. Edey, and Jaren Jackson. I mean, Edey was kind of the best player in college basketball for, 2 to 3 years?
Yeah.
And, with Purdue, he led, number 1 seeded teams. I know they lost in the first round, not this past season, but the year before in March Madness. But he's a really good player. I mean, he's huge. His defense is okay, but they have Jaren Jackson there. But Edey's offense was really good in Purdue, and I think that it's a really good fit for a team that traded away Steven Adams. And I think they're lacking an established big there besides Jaren Jackson. So I like the Edey pick, kind of a layup, even though people were arguing that it was a little too early to jump on him. They could have maybe traded back if you think, but I like the move with Edey. What do you think?
Justin, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to give the Grizzlies an A+. I think Zach Edey fits the best with Memphis here. You have Ja coming back. I love Jaren Jackson Jr. That guy is a stud at the power forward position. I don't know if he's made an all-star game yet, but I am booking him to make the all-star game this year. I love the way Jaren Jackson plays. I mean, when he's maturing as the years goes by. He is a pretty great scorer, Justin. He can shoot the 3 pretty good, and he can play really damn good defense, Justin. And that's what Memphis needs. Memphis historically has always been that gritty defensive team. They've had some great players, but, they've had the likes of Marc Gasol there and Steven Adams. Yeah. And, this past couple years, when Ja was healthy and they were able to make the playoffs, they were always a tough defensive, unit, with our guy Dylan Brooks being there for a handful of years. So, Justin, I love this, and I love Edey to start off the bat. I think he's the most start ready besides the first 2 picks. Out of all, I'm going to say Edey is the most, starting lineup ready for them. And with the Grizzlies, they always have these random players that are pretty good. So looking at the roster, they do have John Morant. They have Desmond Bane, who's going to be good this year. Desmond Bane is going to have a great 3-point shooting year. I don't know if they'll bring back Derrick Rose. They have Jaren Jackson Jr., who I love, Marcus Smart, and Zach Edey. So this team already is a defensive unit to start off. Taylor Jenkins is a pretty good defensive coach. And they also have a guy off the bench by Gigi Jackson, who they love. Gigi Jackson, and Brandon Clark. I believe he was injured Indy last year, but if he comes back, that's another starting center that they have. And Zaire Williams. And so this is a pretty good unit there in Memphis, Justin. And you know what? They're going to be definitely in the 7th or 8th seed. Definitely going to be in the play-in. I like them winning a play-in game for sure.
Yeah, I mean they didn't have Ja for what essentially the entire season because he was
Yeah,
suspended and then he was hurt. Yeah,
yeah,
and so it's a whole new unit kind of coming together all at once, and it's going to be
yeah.
interesting to see what they do. Moving down the draft list a little bit more, there's a few more names I want to mention, and one is the Sixers pick at 16. I mean, if you're watching our TikTok clips, you've probably seen this guy on TikTok, Jared McCain, from Duke. Kind of was just a very solid player, a guy that to me has one of the highest floors, besides the guy we're going to talk about next, in my opinion. But Jared McCain, I think a really good pick for Philadelphia, something they kind of needed. Another good guard to throw into that offense. But yeah, I really it's a good Duke player, and he led the Duke team to they were in the Final Four this year. So
Yeah.
I like Duke. I like Jared McCain, and I like him as a good fit for the Sixers. It's kind of where I thought he would land when I was kind of looking at draft predictions. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, Justin, I actually like Jared McCain, as goofy as he can be, as a little out there he may be. I actually like him, Justin. He kind of reminds me, I don't know if this is a great comparison, but kind of like a young Paul Pierce, a young, kind of like, wouldn't say Vince Carter, he doesn't have the, but just like his scoring wise, I do think he's a pretty good scorer. I think he can be a good guy off the bench, that can handle the ball when Tyrese is on the bench. I like Jerry McCann. He's a pretty decent. Jerry McCann, I think. I'm sorry. He's a pretty good. I'm talking about football, guys, but he's a pretty good scorer. I think that in a year or two he'll be solidified as a maybe a starting two. I think Philadelphia is really nailing it. Daryl Morey, our guy we love back, former GM in Houston. He's kind of doing his thing, picking up. They were third in the East without Embiid, missing that handful last part of the season. So now they're just adding depth. I would like them to bring back Buddy Hield, who I love so much, who's a great shooter. Now that Nick Nurse is leading that team, I love the way Nick Nurse coaches. They were able to push the Knicks as far as they can in round one. Obviously, they weren't all there. It was Nick Nurse's first year, but now going into next year, Tyrese is a solidified star. They did bring Paul George. They have Joel Embiid. They got rid of Tobias. So I do
It's a
think
good
that
thing.
Jared improves their bench. And I think in year two, he'll have a great year. Year one, he'll figure himself out, have a couple 20-point games. But definitely, this is going to pay off in year two for sure.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Buddy Hield. I see them in a little bit of similar lights. They're both really solid
Yeah,
shooters. McCann, I think, can handle the ball better, but Buddy Hield is a free agent, so there are
yeah,
chances that maybe they think McCain will be the replacement, or they think it'll be an addition to that. So
yeah.
we'll still hear what happens with Buddy Hield. But all in all, we're both on board
Yeah.
with Jared McCain as a good pick for the Sixers. Moving to the next team, we're gonna rope in two players here. Kind of the headline of the draft, I think, is the fall of Dalton Knecht. If you did you see that his number is 4, Dalton
Yeah,
Knecht,
connect
and it's
four.
Knecht 4. Funny.
Good. Yeah, you're good. You're back on. So here's the thing with Dalton Knecht, I do think he's going to be a great player off the bench. He is going to find his stride pretty quickly in his first 10 to 15 games. Kind of that guy, that can play, make some great defensive stops. There's not a lot of pressure on Knecht because there's D'Lo, there's LeBron, the potential of, maybe a Levine or DeRozan being there with Edey. Cam Reddish is coming back. I do think he's going to have a great year. I don't know if I mentioned Austin Reeves. So he's going to be able to, back up Austin Reeves just perfectly. There's going to be no pressure on Dalton Knecht. He's going to be solid. Now, with Bronny, here's a couple things that run into my mind with Bronny, and it gets interesting now. Looking at his one and done year at USC, he only averaged like 5 or 6 points. He did have this heart condition that kind of slowed him down. One thing that did impress me, though, was his combine. I mean, yes, combines, aren't the best. They don't always showcase the best out of a player, yada, yada. And the nepotism thing, yada, yada, yada. But you got to remember, this kid has LeBron James genes. This kid has uncles, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, rest in peace, long live Kobe Bryant. But those are his uncles, his NBA forefathers, right? And this guy, look, he's going to have a couple stints in the G League, I believe. I don't think he plays night one, opening night for the Lakers. Maybe he gets a minute or two just for the nostalgia of it. But hey, I think once we get into November, December, January, I think Bronny's going to be kind of in and out the G League. I don't know if LeGM wants that to happen yet, but I think the NBA logical thing is to have LeSun go to the G League just for a little bit, just to experience some NBA competition. And I do think maybe he can join back mid-January and get his father-son moment. That's just what I think, because a lot of good players that came out of the draft, that have that type of hype, sometimes they do go to a G League for a momentary time, a week or two. You also have guys like Christie, who's been on that roster for a while. Maybe he gets more minutes. So it's really how LeGM, LeSun, and LeCoach Redick kind of just triangular, figure it out. But you got to remember, Justin, there's a lot of good players already on this Lakers team, a lot of veterans, a lot of good young players. So it's going to have to take some injuries for Bronny to get 15, 20 minutes a game, or even starting. I mean, I don't know if he starts over D'Lo, or who knows what they get at the backup point guard position. So, I do feel like the logical thing is just to have Bronny spits some time in the G League, and then kind of just pop in later in the year, because I don't want it to be like a Lonzo Ball thing where game one you have a guy like Patrick Beverly picking his pockets 94 feet every play of the game, potentially starting a fight or starting some type of ruckus. So, Bronny going forward now, 5 years, 6 years, is going to be sensational. That's going to be what brings tickets to the Lakers, because I do think Bronny is going to be good. Now, one thing I want to mention, the other son, Bryce Maximus, now that guy, Justin, that guy is going to be good. I think he's already like 6'4". That guy's going to be a slashing scorer, as where Bronny's going to be kind of like what his dad is, a passer, a game manager, a playmaker here and there. But hey, just want to tell you guys there, Dween Nation, Bryce Maximus, son number 2, that guy's going to be a star. When the 2026 draft comes around, I'm picking that guy number 1 overall. So you best wait for Bryce Maximus James to go in the draft. Bryce Maximus. The LeSuns. The LaFamily. LaFamily, LeSuns, the everything. LeJames. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Justin, every NBA draft, every year I do this. Every time it's with the whatever pick the Utah Jazz select, I just feel bad for any player that goes to Utah. It just doesn't, Justin, out of every franchise in the NBA, that has to be the less appealing team to go to. I would go to any other team. I know I don't like Dallas and I don't like Golden State or whatever. But even like I'd rather be in the Clippers. At least you're in LA, you know what I'm saying? But like, it's just like Utah has to be the most unappealing team to go to. I mean, if you get picked by Utah and traded, it don't matter where I'm traded to. As long as I'm out of Utah, I am out. I mean, Justin, it's just such a boring city to possibly go. I'm sorry if you're from Utah watching, doing it. We have nothing against Utah, but it's just doesn't seem like the most basketball city there, Justin. That's all I will say. You can make your clues after that. It just seems very unfriendly. And Justin, thank God they've never won a championship. You know what I'm saying? Thank God Michael Jordan was able to beat them twice. But with Isaiah, how do you say his last name? Collier. I don't want to say Collier or Collier. He's solid, Justin. I remember during the college basketball season, everybody would say stuff like, "Oh, why is everybody focusing on Bronny when this guy Isaiah is balling?" And it's true. This guy Isaiah was pretty good in college, man. I mean, he was their star player, I would say. For the USC Trojans. I think that he didn't get a lot of attention just because Bronny, was on the team. But I do think he could be potential starter there. Listen, there's nothing really interesting in Utah. And a guy that's averaged 16 points per game in college, that's really good. If you can average over, 13 points per game in college, that's really good. And this guy, Zay was able to, average 16 points. And, he's a little bit of a raw talent, but he's one of those guys, Justin, that I would just start night one. Put him out there. Utah doesn't ever have playoff hopes every year since Donavan and Rudy Gobert left. So definitely is a guy that I'd like to start night one and just let him see what he does. I think that's a guy that can learn off the bat. A very mature guy, a very humble, soft-spoken guy. Never really tried to capitalize on headlines being at USC. And so I like the draft pick. I like it for Utah's sake, not Isaiah's sake. I feel like he should be in a better team. I know Portland had Scoot and they had Anthony, but I would like to see him in Portland. Would have been nice. But hey, I like Isaiah Collier there in Utah. Hopefully he's able to bring some juice there in Utah, some headlines, some playoffs, just everything there in Utah, Justin. Like I said, that has to be one of the most boringest NBA franchises.
And we were back from a quick break, and we're still talking about the Utah Jazz because they had a great pick in Isaiah Collier, and they also get a great pick in Kyle Filipowski early in the second round. He was one of the better players him and Jared McCain for the Duke Blue Devils last year. You probably heard some of that drama when he got the court storming, and he was in the middle of it, and he got injured, and there was problems there. But he was just a really good player anyway past that, and he drops into the early second round. So I like that. I'm gonna mention just a couple names. I'll definitely get your take on actually this next guy. Or actually before that, Baylor Scheierman got drafted by the Boston Celtics to end round one. What a great player he was in college, and he kind of is going to slot in perfectly to what they need. Super excited what he can do with the Boston Celtics. Kind of just slides in as a good draft pick for the reigning champs. And then the next guy who I think is a really interesting pick to the Toronto Raptors, Jamal Shead, your guy from the Houston Cougars. Give me your thoughts on him as a Toronto Raptor.
Oh, Justin, down in Third Ward in Houston, we love some Jamal Shead. That guy was our hero. He was our star player all the year. We had such a great team this year, Justin. It was so unfortunate we weren't able to beat Duke. I think it was in the Elite Eight. But Jamal Shead, I mean, he just had a great game. Justin, I don't want to bring this up because I love you so much, but he had a great game against your Aggies in the tournament. I think, our guy Sharp got fouled out, and Shead was able to make bucket after bucket. And, Justin, I love your Aggies. Your Aggies were a solid team, but Shead did everything he could to put, my Cougars on the back. But, Shead all year, Justin, was that guy. He was the heart and soul of our team. Little guy, little guy, at the point guard, barely 6 feet, but man, he did everything he could for our beloved Cougars. And for that, everybody at U of H will always be appreciative. He could have his jersey retired for U of H. He could come back any halftime, and we'd give him the biggest, round of applause, standing ovation. He is a U of H legend. I don't know, the past, but if we're talking best Cougar basketball players of all time, he has to be in the top 10. Of course, Olajuwon and Drexler, fall as 1 and 2, and many others underneath. But you have to say Shead is a top 10 Cougar, men's basketball Cougar of all time, man. That guy was the heart and soul of our team. So now I like him in Toronto. Obviously, earlier you mentioned Emmanuel Quickly, who's going to be their starting point guard going into next year. We like Gary Trent, who's been there for some time. Gary Trent is a solid player at the shooting guard position. They drafted Grady Dick last year, who's pretty solid as well. They traded for Bruce Brown. So those are their guards, kind of, sort of say. So it's tough to say if Jamal Shead is going to, get some time. They even just traded for Davion Mitchell. So there's a lot of guard action going there in Toronto. And so, even RJ Barrett's probably going to demand a lot of the ball. Scotty Barnes is no doubt the leader. So we'll see there what happens in Toronto. It's going to be very interesting. It's one of the things I'm going to look closely into as far as like non-playoff teams from this past year, the Raptors. And so it's very interesting to see, and I'm excited to see what Jamal can do. Hopefully, maybe in the future he could get traded to a situation where he's kind of leading the team. And so maybe a backup point guard, or hopefully in years later down the line a starter. But I hope this is not I hope Jamal is not one of those guys that's just a good college player and it just fades away. Hopefully he's one of those guys that can develop in a role for himself.
I think he kind of reminds me of like a Pat Bev kind of role where he can kind of be, he won't be the star on any team, but he'll be a really instrumental piece of a good championship team if he can land somewhere good like that. But yeah, that's a Cougar the Houston Cougar who's a star. He brought the juice every night. I've watched his games, and yeah, he broke the heart of Aggies in March Madness. But I'm gonna give an Aggie some love here. Another undrafted piece. His name is Tyrece Boots Radford. He was an undrafted free agent for the San Antonio Spurs. Will be playing on their summer league team. But he was the second best player for the Aggies for the last 3 seasons since I started at A&M. And he's a really great ball handler, a great attacker at the rim. He can shoot from time to time, and he's got a good winning kind of attitude. I've gotten to meet him once, so he's Boots Radford, a name to remember. But yeah, what do you think about Boots?
Justin, I cannot believe he went undrafted. He actually was the reason why that thriller game against my Cougars went that far. I mean, he's a stud of a basketball player. It concerns me a little bit from these NBA GMs that a guy like this and a guy that we'll talk about here in a second, and DJ Burns, these are the guys that, like, if I was a GM, I'd take in the second round, man. A guy that can play at the highest level. Look at it this way. This guy didn't, you've mentioned he's been there for 3 years. That's good enough already as a basketball player. If you can stay 3 years at a college like Texas A&M that's in the SEC, that's top, competition right there, Justin, in basketball. And not only that, this guy's able to perform, when it's time to perform. We're talking about NCAA tournaments. He's dropping, 27 points. That's, in NBA, that's decent, really good. But in college, Justin, for you to drop over 20 points in a game, that shows talent right there, Justin. College, it's tough to get over 20 points for an individual player. So, that's something that I believe these scouts and GMs, they got definitely wrong there. And, Radford's going to be, you said he's on the Thunder?
No, the Spurs.
The Spurs. Man, if the Spurs can just, have him and Castle, and they have CP3 there, they already have Wemby. Man, that's going to be, something to look at going into this year. I mean, we're not talking winning games, but we're looking at stat lines and saying, hey, man, this guy Radford is playing good in the Spurs, and he can be a good, starting shooting guard. Maybe they can put him at the 3. But, man, Justin, I'm a little surprised that he went undrafted, man. It has me a little concerned about what these GMs are thinking.
Yeah, no, I love the love that you're giving to
Yeah.
Boots. He's been a really great player, and yeah, he's got an opportunity to be the 2 or 3 for a Spurs team that's in need of some future players. So I like Boots there, and as you mentioned, let's transition to DJ Burns, who with NC State really took the league by storm in college basketball last year. A big athlete, and he absolutely dominated at the college level, especially last season. Did NC State make a Final Four run too? Is right?
They did make the Final Four. I think they lost to Purdue.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're
yeah.
correct. I'll look it up for you. But yeah, what are your thoughts on DJ Burns?
Yeah, Justin, here's the biggest thing right here with DJ Burns. He shedded 45 pounds, since the loss in the Final Four. So that right there tells you everything you need to know. And once again, I'm going to say it again. Some of these NBA GMs really got it wrong. There's other players that they pick. I do think that DJ Burns is a guy that it's one of those return for investment. Yes, he went undrafted, but I would have drafted him personally. I'm just going to run through teams that I feel could use a guy like DJ Burns. We're looking at a team like Phoenix, who, yes, they have Nurkic, but Nurkic had some injury issues. Looking at a team like the Raptors here, yes, they have Scotty Barnes, but looking at the center position with Jakopertl, who is not bad, but he's not a real strong defensive guy. We like Kelly Olynyk, Justin. He's been around, but Justin, it seems like every trade deadline, Kelly Olynyk is being traded around. Chris Boucher, he's been good for his fair number of years in Toronto, but Justin, he's 31, and at age 31, he hasn't really made a big deal. Justin only grabbing 4 rebounds this year. So I do think that DJ Burns could have fit the best in Toronto. We just talked about him a handful of moments ago. They have a bunch of guards, so they do need a big body to help Scotty Barnes out. So I would have loved to see DJ Burns there in Toronto. Once again, I'm going to say it again. It has me a little bit concerned on what these GMs are scouting, and what their actual needs is, because every March Madness game I watch, DJ Burns was just putting up a fight. His heart is 100% there. His tenacity, his ability to get defensive, offensive rebounds, it really can help a team win a championship. Literally, he's that type of guy that I can see in 5-6 years being that glue guy, a Robert Williams type of player, that just can grab you defensive rebounds. I feel like not his offensive game, but his defensive game reminds me just a tad bit of Zion, just in the paint. I feel like he has a little bit of a Shaq just presence as far as just getting the ball and dunking it, putting it back in. I feel like DJ Burns is a guy that if he can lose some more weight and have a great, summer league, man, this guy can really be something for a team of really good starting center for sure.
Yeah, you speak in all good points. I follow what you're saying. He was a really great piece in March Madness, and you're right. I don't know what some of these GMs are doing. Some of these late players, like even the guy I was going to bring up next, Jack Golhke, like he for Oakland, he made 10 3-pointers in the game against Kentucky. Was it Kentucky?
Yeah.
And knocked him out of the tournament. Like a guy that can make 10 3-pointers in a game, and he just that's what he does. I feel like a lot of NBA teams always try to they find something like that. Like it was Duncan Robinson. We've had those. Sam Hauser on the Boston Celtics. Like Golhke could be a really underrated piece, and he's on the Thunder's UDFA team or for the summer league. So there's a lot of interesting little names, and that you'll hear by the end of the year. 1 or 2 of these names that are late are going to come out and be really interesting pieces for any one of these NBA teams. But that's what the draft's for, right? You find those hidden gems, and you also have your set it and forget it type of players. But yeah, that we covered a lot of what the draft what we saw from the draft, what we wanted to take away from it. But yeah, that wraps up our episode. NBA is taking a transition to summer league, but the news of free agency and the draft are they're pushing through. We're getting through that, and then obviously football is right after that. But we really appreciate the listen, guys, because the draft. I mean, what an exciting time! What an exciting time to be alive, guys.
For sure.
But yeah, thanks for listening, Dween Nation. And Janoah, as always, send us out.
Yo, Dween Nation, we love you guys. Hey, just enjoy these last couple basketball episodes. Soak it in, enjoy it, because there might not be some for a handful of months. We're talking October, November, when Boston raises the banner and starts their, title defense. But until then, Justin, I think we might have another episode or two about basketball. If I don't believe, maybe a full free agency recap. But other than that, Dween Nation, hey, we are gearing up for football season. Justin, I'm excited. I know you're excited. We're about to start hitting some mock drafts pretty soon. We're about to start doing all kinds of fantasy football and football-related things. So, Dween Nation, don't you even think about, turning ahead or batting an eye, because we're going to be dropping content all the way through February. We're excited. We can't wait, Justin. And as always, Justin, hey, thanks for watching and peace.
Peace, y'all.